Hey farm fam, thought I would try a new spot in the house. We'll see if I like it. Today I found this video that was actually published, just a couple of days ago on YouTube, and I thought it was really good. I was kind of hoping to go over it with it like playing on half the screen and me on the other half, because I've seen people do it before, and I don't know how to do that. So I'm just going to play it and talk about it. I will put it I'll try to link it or whatever in the description. So if you want to see the whole thing, you can go ahead and do that. But it is by the shepherdess, and she goes over why meat is expensive but ranchers are broke. 2022 beef cattle crisis, micro ranching for profit. And I was interested in this because I recently watched a video by The Box, which is, I guess, kind of goes over the same thing, but kind of goes over the beef industry. And so this is for those who are raising convention cows off of grain, and we'll just watch it and we'll just go into it. But, I really like it. So here we go.
Adjusting for inflation, the price of ground beef at the grocery store has gone up 40% since 1990, while the price of live beef cattle has dropped. Is the consumer paying big and the beef rancher going broke? Where is all the money going? In this video, I'm going to give a brief explanation of how the conventional beef industry works, why the prices at the grocery store are so high, and 3 ways you can still profit from beef cattle in 2022. First up is explaining the U.S. beef supply chain. In the United States, there are 2.04 million ranchers.
That is a lot of ranchers, 2.4 million. That is amazing. And especially where ranching and farming lifestyle in general is going down a lot. According to this website, back in the early 1900s, there was about 6.5 million farmers. So people who, let's see, I wonder what they include. So people, pretty much anyone who made money off of growing plants or raising animals. Now in the 2000s, there is around 2 million. And now this big drop happened in the mid-1900s when I believe it was Nixon. So back in the 70s, President Nixon, Secretary of Agriculture, Earl Butz, told farmers, get big or get out. And this, even though the downfall of agriculture was before this, not the downfall, but less farmers were happening before this. This was a really big and terrible thing to tell people. And that is because it suddenly took the choices of us as consumers out of our hands, because suddenly we didn't have as many people to go to choose food and products, and suddenly we had to rely on big businesses to supply us our food. And as I think most of us know, big business does not have our interest at heart. The smaller a business, usually the better. We're going to get better service. We're going to get more local. We're going to support the community. Yes, we are probably going to be paying more, but I am willing to not have video subscriptions or product subscriptions or other things, so I can spend more money on local food, local products, and so forth. So let's keep going. So she said 2.4 million ranchers.
0.04 million ranchers, 26,586 feedlot.
That's it.
For me,
if anyone's been to a feedlot, I won't say anything. Maybe, I don't know. I hate bashing on other farmers unless they're really terrible, because they're doing what they feel like they think is best, and really that's all you can give someone. But there's a better way. But visit a feedlot and then come back and tell me what you think. If they let you actually visit them, because oftentimes they don't like people coming on and seeing them because they either treat their animals terribly or they're afraid they'll get recorded and put online or, Anyway, so there we go.
1,586 feedlots, 4 meat packers,
4 meat packers,
and 355 million consumers.
Okay, let's listen to that again, and I won't pause this. I'm just going to play all the way through.
In the United States, there are 2.04 million ranchers, 26,586 feedlots, 4 meat packers, and 355 million consumers. If you were following closely, you will already realize the bottleneck that is in this system. In the conventional beef industry, the cow-calf producer raises a calf for 6 to 12 months. The calves are then auctioned off to backgrounders and feedlots who fatten the beef for roughly 9 months. Finally, the feedlots sell the fattened cattle to meat packers who, within the week, process and pack the beef for distribution to grocery stores.
So I didn't get a very good screenshot of this. It was kind of blurry when I paused it. But if you look at this processing plant, look at all of those people and all I'm so flabbergasted because the butcher we use in Salina, we know pretty much everyone's names, everyone's faces. I think they have 6-ish employees, and yes, they're very busy, but they're local. We know them. They know this community. And so just thinking about sending our beef, to just mindlessly sell it off to people that I don't know, how are they treating the animals? How are they cutting the carcasses? How is their facility? Do I know these people? There's a lot of unknowns here when it comes to a lot of beef out there that you buy at the store. And I like to know where the food that I am eating and my family is eating is coming from.
The pricing in the beef cattle industry is largely dictated by the 4 meat packers: Tyson, Cargill, JBS, and National Beef Packing Co.
Now, if anyone has heard of a monopoly or the game Monopoly, there are prices set in the game Monopoly, but imagine someone has control of at least half the board, maybe over half. And when you land on their spot, they get to dictate any price that they want to you. And that's kind of what's happening here, is you have the four processing plants, and they get to tell you what, when, where, and why. And that's it doesn't give you a lot of power. Of course, she goes over this in the video, so maybe you should just watch it and I'll stop interrupting. But people who, when there's not very many people who hold the power of other people's lives, usually bad decisions are made. Just like,
these 4 meat packers control 80% of the United States beef supply. This hyper-centralization of processing, packing, and distribution is what enables live cattle prices to be manipulated and ultimately driven down. Meat packer manipulation is not a new thing in the United States. A web search on the Big Five will quickly show you that the beef industry has been battling the situation since 1890.
So right here she shows a little article, and 1919 FTC meatpacking report. And with World War I in the history books, President Woodrow Wilson in 1919 ordered the FTC to conduct a thorough investigation of the meatpacking industry. The FTC issued a report stating the 5 companies, Wilson, Swift, Morse, Coude, and Armour, controlled virtually the entire industry and acted as a monopoly. Remember what we said about monopoly? The Big Five were shown to make competition essentially impossible for smaller companies and to systematically defraud consumers and producers alike by fixing prices, restricting the flow of food, and manipulating markets. And she's going to go over this a little bit more, but this is, I believe in a free market system, which means everyone gets the opportunity and government takes their grubby little hands out of it to allow people to make businesses, to give people options. And so the reason why people think capitalism is so bad is because when government gets their hands on things and you allow for over regulations and et cetera, you let big companies that have the money dictate what happens, and it doesn't allow for smaller companies who can probably do a better job and have competitive pricing to come in and help balance the system instead of all these people having the power and they can do whatever they want, pretty much.
The margins in the meatpacking industry are huge. Kansas cattleman Steve Stratford reported that in 2020, the Big Four's margin on a choice steer hovered around $1,000 per head. That same report indicated that 500 to 600,000 head of choice steer are processed every week, giving the Big Four a collective gross margin of $2.6 billion per month. There is a lot that goes into just how meat packers manipulate live cattle pricing, but the bottom line is that the Big Four have contributed to the 50% decline in live cattle pricing over the last 30 years. But why are the packers driving the U.S. beef ranchers out of business? Don't they rely on this sector to continue to facilitate their own operation? Not entirely. In fact, in 2016, the USDA repealed the enforcement of the Mandatory Country of Origin Labeling Act. MCOOL, as it is abbreviated, requires retailers to provide their customers with information regarding the country of origin on regulated commodities. The repeal of the enforcement of MCOOL essentially allows these meat packers to import foreign beef carcasses.
Now, if you like Chinese cuisine, Brazilian cuisine, whatever cuisine, great. But do you know what I don't like? I don't want to go to the store and buy beef that's been imported from Brazil. You don't know how old it is, you don't know what it's gone through, and nothing against Brazilian beef, but why? Because they can get it cheaper, and because they don't have to pay them as much money as they would regular, and they're not even paying ranchers right now a decent salary. You talk to majority of ranchers and they are struggling so hard because people have talked about the up price of beef at the store. Guess what? Ranchers aren't getting a dime of that. There is no such thing as a meat shortage or a food shortage. We make so much food in this country, but it's all dictated and regulated, and so we don't get the full benefit. And just like this book that I talked to you guys about in the defense of food, he talks about how, we used to eat fruits and vegetables in season. We knew when it was ripe. But now when we go to the store, some of the stuff is, a lot of it is from Mexico. Actually, a prime majority is actually from Mexico. And which is fine, like great that Mexico can grow this stuff, but it's not being picked at ripeness, because if it was picked at ripeness, it would be bad by the time it got to the store. Instead, they pick it before ripeness. They use chemicals to make it ripe, or it's still not ripe when you get to the store. And then you get unnutritious food by the time. And so it's like you spend this money on this food, and it's not that it's not good for you. Like, I'd rather you eat that than packaged processed granola bar or Fruity Pebbles or whatever. But the problem is that we're just not worried about where our food is coming from and what it's going through. Plants need to be treated with just as much respect and care as animals. And we're just treating food just like a battery cell, just pop it in, doesn't matter what, but food is really important and we need to take much more care in it. So, all right, let's keep going.
Process them, pack them, and put a label on them that says product of USA simply because they were cut up and shrink wrapped in the United States. If MCOOL is not reenacted, it leaves the door wide open for a massive explosion of beef imports in the coming year. Now, the good news is that a proposition to reinstate MCOOL was put to the U.S. Congress in September of 2021. If you are a beef rancher or a prospective beef rancher, I highly recommend you clicking on the link down below for instructions on how to contact your senator to encourage his support of the bill. But moving on, why is beef so expensive at the grocery stores? The price of ground beef at the grocery stores has gone up 40% since 1990, and this price increase has little to do with food shortages. As mentioned above, with such a centralized meat packing system, this small group of companies is able to call a lot of shots. And two ways that they can manipulate consumer beef pricing is simply by naming their price, and number two, by limiting the output of supply, thus manufacturing an artificial supply and demand situation. Now, we just dealt with 80% of the US beef supply, but what about the remaining 20%? Small farmers make up a greater portion of the remaining 20% of the meat supply chain in the United States. These small-scale growers collaborate with private processors to deliver meat direct to consumer. They are literally the saving grace of the U.S. supply chain, and they are the reason that many were able to retain access to quality food during the shortages of 2020 and 2021. But the survival of the local farming system relies on the support of the consumer. As grocery shoppers and consumers, we need to understand that we are at the same risk as the rancher, and that we can be financially manipulated by a centralized meat processing system. By supporting the small...
I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist or bash on other countries, but what she's saying makes me think of why would we put our food system in the hands of people who may or may not have our best interest at heart? The people who are actually going to care about you are local people, community people. I'm not even going to touch the majority of the government in the federal government. I hope our state government cares about us, but there are definitely some states that we've seen that have not cared about their people with certain laws and regulations that have been made, which is really unfortunate. But if we can get the power of our food system back in the hands, and this isn't a law, this isn't going to be a law that's going to be passed, this is going to be you caring about where your food come from, and you trying and finding people who can grow vegetables and produce. Go find your local farmers markets. Support those people. Start growing your own little garden. And people might say gardening takes a lot of time, but it really doesn't. Back when I had my garden, which would be fun to start this again this year, it really didn't take that much time to do, as much time as I want to. I could spend maybe 2 hours a week, and that's really all I had to spend, but I just enjoyed spending time in the garden. Maybe you'll find that too when you want to spend more time. But we are allowing our choices to just be taken away from us. And that deals with a lot of different stuff, but we're going to stick with food right now. Is we're taking away our food choices, and we're giving them away willingly, thinking that other people know what's best for us, and that's not the case. Is we need to get back into local food production, and also understanding this is going outside of this video, but understanding that we don't need to have everything all year round. Like, I think I mentioned this before, sweet corn, I only eat that pretty much when it's fresh during the time where we harvest it. That's it. And the more I'm learning about eating things in their season, the more I'm trying to do that. Now, if it's picked at, peak ripeness, and then I chop it up, bag it, put it in the freezer, sure, that's great. Frozen food is awesome because it's almost always picked at peak freshness, cut up and frozen. It doesn't go through the process of canning. Canning's good, but it goes through more processes that are going to break down nutrients that are there when it's frozen. And so freezing that food, and it was in the book Defense of Food, where he talks about going to farmer's market when maybe broccoli is at height of season, buying a bunch, cutting it up and freezing it. And if you don't have a big freezer, I highly recommend you investing in one. Even if it's just a 5 cubic freezer, preferably more like a 14, maybe 20 cubic foot freezer. And that way you can buy bulk beef or bulk meat in bulk and freezing that and having all of that. And then you can get frozen vegetables and fruits and putting them in this freezer. And it's not going to take as much more energy as you might think, because as he stated in his book, that this freezer isn't going to be opened all the time like your kitchen fridge and freezer. That's open all the time, so it's letting cold air escape, and that takes more energy, where your big freezer isn't going to be opened as often, maybe once, twice a day. And especially if it's a chest freezer, when you open it, it's not like a vertical freezer that when you open it, all the cold air falls out. This will stay in more. And that way you can put your food choices back in your own hands. And I know that there's probably someone out there close by or in your neighborhood or in your city that on the outskirts grows vegetables, especially if you can find a CSA and a community supported agriculture CSA, and you can get those fresh seasonal veggies and probably even fruit too. So anyway, don't let your choices be taken away.
You may pay slightly more at your local farm than you would at Walmart, but you need to view this as an investment in infrastructure, because once these small farmers are gone, it's not just the food that is gone, it is the education and it is the experience necessary to sustain you and your family for 3 meals a day.
I like what she says there, that not only the food will be gone, but also the experience. The experience that Stan and I have gained in the 2 years that we've been doing this is incredible, and that's after doing all this research. So I can't even imagine what it'd be like not to have anyone to read up on and then trying to start this from scratch. But if we allow small farmers, by not supporting them, to go out, we're going to lose all of this experience. And as I've said before, farming is a great way of growing up. Now, I'm not talking about conventional farming. I'm talking about farming where you're there and with your hands, and it's just so personable, and you're going to get amazing kids off of it. You're going to become a better person by farming, and you don't have to buy a homestead to participate in this. If you like the Braden Acre Farms in Cedar City, they love having people come and volunteer and helping with that. Like doing things like that will really connect you back into food and give you that experience, because the more experiences we have like this, the more understanding that we're going to have, and we're going to be able to just better navigate life because of these experiences. And just because I grew up on a farm, I have just so much more appreciation with having cattle and doing more things hands-on. There's just so much more to it than being in a tractor. And the tractor is way easier. There's just not the same feel. And she talked about how you're going to be spending more with a local farmer, but you're also taking power back. You're getting power back to yourself on these food choices, and you're putting your money where your mouth is, of sorts, because you want this better food. The food that you're getting at most of we'll be generous and say 80%. I want to say 90% of the food at the grocery store is fake. Back in, I can't remember. You should really read In the Defense of Food. That was a great book. Back in the mid 1900s, I want to say it was the 70s, maybe the 60s. When they first came out with margarine, whenever that was, it was immature. It was imitation butter. That's what it was called. And so any food that wasn't the legit version of a food was called imitation blank. And so like margarine would have been called imitation butter. Most of the breads right now in grocery stores should be called imitation bread, because when I make bread, and I think we've talked about this, if you include the 2 different types of flour, I have 5 ingredients. Technically, there's really only 3. water, flour, and yeast. That's it. All the salt. I'm sorry, four ingredients. A little bit of salt. And that's it. When you go to a grocery store, there could be up to over 30 ingredients in bread. Bread does not take that much ingredients. And I don't know why I even got on this. Oh, imitation food. And so just because beef is, like the grain-fed beef looks like beef and everything, it's been fed antibiotics. It's been fed grain, which seeds, like corn and etc., soybeans and stuff. That is not what cows are meant to eat, and that's why they need to be fed antibiotics. It's because they get sick from eating the grain, and so antibiotics is put in their regular diet for the few months that they're in a feedlot, so they don't get sick. And then they're also living in their own poop, and so it may look like beef, but honestly, it should probably be called imitation beef. And the chicken that you buy at the store, especially like the prepackaged like chicken tenders or whatever, I love those. I think they taste great. But guess what? That's really not chicken. And it's just, I just wish I kind of put that back where imitation food. And we need to get back to eating real food that is actually going to be good and decent for us. That was the other point I was going to get to. We should talk about making a profit. I used to think that beef or meat was expensive, and then I actually got in the meat industry and realized for us what it takes to actually make money at this. And we have a lot of people get upset with us. I say a lot because the negative almost always outweighs the bad, which is sad. But the people give us negative comments about how expensive our beef is. Now, back in my day, or at the store, and get this, for this, I don't even know what the prices are anymore because I don't buy it there. I mean, sometimes I buy that imitation chicken because it tastes good and it helps me eat a salad when I don't have my own chicken to put in there, but I preferably use our own chicken, but we don't always have that in stock. I just don't think the same way other people do. Our average of 10-ish, I'm gonna say $10-ish a pound is honestly, I think, just right. Could we go higher? Sure. Are there a lot of people in other places that have more than $10 a pound? Sure. And if they can sell it for that, that's great. But even at $10 a pound, like if we went any lower, we would not be making money. By the time we pay for expenses and websites and marketing, which marketing is a huge thing, and she talks about that. And if you don't market, you're not going to sell. That's just how it is. Unless you have this magical thing and you're in the right spot and it just grows naturally, like that's awesome. But we pay for marketing, pay ourselves, have the opportunity to be generous with our beef, with like our food donations and our giveaways and other things. It just gives us so much more freedom. A lot of farmers and ranchers are really cutting themselves short by not paying them, by not charging enough for their services. And if you want to have good food, you're going to have to make sacrifices. Michael Pollan, who wrote In Defense of Food, he was saying that a lot of countries outside the United States pay around 14% of their monthly budget, of their monthly expenses. I'm not saying that right. Whatever their paycheck that they bring home, 14% of that paycheck goes to food. And that's about what Americans used to pay for food. And now, and I should look it up, I want to say he said like 3%, which when I looked up what if 3% of our income went to food, I don't even know how people would eat with that. Like, well, eat really crap, cheap food. But then you're dealing with obesity and the health costs. The more money that you spend on good quality, real food, pasture-raised and finished beef, fruits and vegetables that are trying to be local or frozen or whole, just the good stuff, then you're going to be paying less on healthcare. You're going to be mentally feeling better, physically feeling better, probably spiritually feeling better, knowing that you're not adding to the destruction of our planet by putting plastic waste out there and other problems. So you are really investing in yourself and your community and in so much more when you buy local and you care about where your food comes from and you're willing to spend more. David and I don't have Amazon or Disney Plus, like Amazon Plus, Disney Plus. We don't have Netflix. We do subscribe to one thing called the Bid Angel because I believe in what they do. They're a Utah company, and I do subscribe from them. But we don't have a lot of these extra subscriptions because we want to put our money elsewhere where it really matters, like saving, like buying good food. We also donate, we just do other things because honestly, a lot of those movie sites don't even have anything worthwhile to watch anyway. And, we believe our money should go somewhere where it matters. And food is definitely a huge place where we agreed on early in our marriage where we want to spend a lot of our income is getting really good food. Here we go.
On beef cattle boils down to 3 different elements which are outlined in detail in this book, Salad Bar Beef by Joel Salatin.
I love that she brings up Joel Salatin on here because I mentioned him in the last video, he is amazing. This is a really great book. And I know this part is more for people who want to become beef producers and ranchers, but I think it's good for everyone to understand what we do. That does make our cost, even though you're going to be paying more per pound with us than a grocery store, this allows us to get the most out of that payment, and so we can also invest back in the company and give you even more as much as possible as we can, and also gives us a good quality of life. And Joel Salatin is amazing.
But to boil it down, the 3 essential elements to making a profit on beef cattle in 2022 are these. Number 1, go grass-based. Select cows that have been bred to perform on grass and grass only. If you guys want to know what that looks like,
So that's a huge thing. We've realized that our cows do really well on pasture, as we talked about them being too fat, and which I guess is a good thing in a way because that means they're going to do really well on grass, and then we don't have to feed them grain, which we've talked about. Grain is not good for cattle or any ruminant animal. The only animals that should be eating seeds / grain are pigs. And even them, they're not that much. They just need a little bit because they're omnivores and they're not ruminants like cows, sheep, goats, etc. The other animals are chickens. Chickens and birds, poultry, they also need seeds because that goes into their diets. They're also quite omnivorous and a little bit carnivorous too. And they need those seeds to help with digestion, to help with health, and etc. So those are the only 2 animals that should ever be grain fed. But even then, they shouldn't be grain finished. That shouldn't be the huge part of their diet. That should actually be a very small part of their diet. And the majority is for pigs, and chickens should be insects. Pigs will eat small animals, like they'll good for like rice for mice and other rodents and pests. They'll eat them. And greens, grass, and so other than that, no one else should be eating seeds for ruminant animals, and cows are ruminants.
Reduce or eliminate skyrocketing feed inputs by maximizing your forage resource. Use things like rotational grazing, pasture stockpiling, and only carry as many cows as your land can support.
I really like this lady because she also brings up Salatin, but also rotational grazing. As I talked about in a past video, grass-fed cows versus pasture-fed cows is a big difference because I haven't visited a lot of grass-fed farms, but some that I've learned or have visited, the grass-fed is kind of sad because they're just given a huge area and it's not actually benefiting the soil, where the rotational grazing and moving the cows through a field and they're in smaller areas and they're actually utilizing that feed more. Because when you have a whole field, if you let the cows in, they're going to take all the best stuff and then they're going to come back and eat the second best, and then they're just going to keep eating it down and down until it's not good. And if you take off a part of a plant more than once in I think it's 20-ish days, then you're damaging the root system. It's dying, it's becoming shorter, and you're actually hurting the soil. Where with us, we let the cows in to the small space, they take off this part, and then the next day they move, and they might come back for a second, but we try not to let that happen. And then, so this part is here, and then get moved into the next area, and while they're eating down the rest of the area, this area regrows this part, and so it keeps its root system, actually strengthens its root system as this is growing back, and then the cows come back later, let's see if I can say this right, no sooner than 30-ish days. Preferably, it's going to be months, like 6 months. And then, it's growing, and then they'll take that chomp off again, and then the roots will continue to stay healthy and strong, and allows for, and have we talked about this? I don't remember. But it helps bring CO2 out of the atmosphere, put more oxygen from, the plants doing their things, and it allows for fertilization and so much. So, grass-fed, grain-fed, terrible. Grass-fed, good. Pasture-raised, pasture-finished, the best. Like, tippy top, the best. So if you ever are curious, you should be buying from us, but if you decide to cheat on us and go with somebody else, make sure they are doing this rotational grazing method
without excess input. Number 2 is cut out the middleman and go direct to consumer. Finish your beef on grass and focus on marketing. Now, this does take a lot more elbow grease in marketing, and
marketing takes up so much time, people. So much time. And a lot of people become farmers because we don't want to deal with people. But the only way to sell our products is to deal with people. So, I love dealing with you guys. You guys are the best. But farmers are usually not very extroverted people. Maybe they can be, but they want to, do their own thing. So marketing is really, really hard. Mostly Stan and I have spent so much time building websites, trying to find the right website to use and trying to make sure it's user friendly, doing Facebook ads, linking together stuff, doing these YouTube videos. This YouTube video is going so long. I'm so sorry. There's just so much that goes into this, and business people understand why certain things cost so much. Even if they don't understand the intricacies of it, they understand paying people what they're worth, because every business person and every person that has something to sell wants to be paid what they're worth. I talked with a gal. She's awesome. I love her products. Angie's Homemade Breads and Cookies. She's located in Manti. I bought some stuff off of her, and I told her that she needed to at least double her prices because her stuff is good. She offered free delivery to anyone in Sanpete County, which is crazy. And I like it because who doesn't like free shipping, right? And her prices are just so low, and people just need to be willing to just look at food differently, pay for good local food, and stop putting our money on time waster stuff. Sorry.
The establishment phase, but it is key to eliminating the control of the middleman. And not only the control of the middleman, but the middleman cuts into your profit margins, which you desperately need as a beef rancher.
That's true. So, I really like this one YouTuber that I watch, Michelle McDaniel. My thoughts might offend you. My thoughts that might offend you, something like that. Some of her recent videos, she's mentioned how her video is not being sponsored by anyone but her own companies because sponsors tell you what to say and what to do. And that's the same thing with middleman. When you are leaning on the government for subsidies or money or etc., they get to tell you what to do. When they say jump, you say how high. Same thing with the middleman. If Stan and I were selling to grocery stores or to someone who wants us to do this much all the time, constant demand, or like we thought about selling to restaurants, and we have sold to some restaurants, but they only want certain cuts and they want to be a certain time. And so when you have that middleman, you like you said, lose out on money, but they get to tell you what to do, and you kind of have to follow that if you feel like you don't have a choice. And so the middleman maybe in some ways is slightly easier, but it can also be really draining because I think I mentioned this before. Stan and I believe in using nose to tail on the cow. We're still working on that, where we want to have the whole cow be more useful, like collecting a lot of the waste and composting it. Or I would love to be able to turn our hides into leather products. I'm still working on that. It's been really hard to find different things, to just properly use the whole animal so there's not any waste. And the best way to do that is to cut out the middleman. So there we go.
And number 3 is avoid expensive equipment and infrastructure at all costs.
I don't have the exact numbers, but I remember one time Stan and I talking about how much it takes to maintain our equipment is crazy. We would love for one day to cut our equipment in half. So instead of having 4 tractors, we have a small one for menial stuff and a large one for when we do need to bale hay, because we'll probably always be baling hay. It's mostly just a stockpile for ourselves in winter. And instead of having 5 semi trucks, maybe just 2. Just like, because that will cut so much of our costs way down. We've already cut costs by not doing as much tractor work, especially with tilling and all that, and then also spreading fertilizers and chemicals and stuff. There's a lot of money that goes into gas with that. When you have that big machinery, which if you're in big farming, you kind of have to have it. So that's why we want to scale that down. Infrastructure costs a lot of money.
In today's beef markets, tractors, trucks, and expensive animal housing will put you out of business before you have even started.
I think that's about it on her video. But this is actually the first video I've seen of hers, and I am a big fan. So this is the Shepherdess podcast. I'll put that video in the description, assuming I know how to do that. So there you go. Do you have any questions or thoughts? Please leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear them. And I just thought this was a really good video and really breaking down kind of what the meat industry is a little bit without condemning it too much. I would love to just fire and brimstone really a lot of industries, but we don't want to do that. The only way that these changes are going to be made, going to the government and saying, please don't let there be conventional feedlots and blah, they're so terrible. That's not going to fix the problem. The problem is how we as a community, I'm going to put us in that, how we look at food. And so we're the problem. We're the ones, I'm trying to remember, was it still also in the Nixon? It still might have been in the Nixon presidency, where mothers complained about having to buy food. So they wanted cheap food. And so that's where the big farms started coming in and growing wheat, corn, and soybean. And that's really why a lot of our food is so crappy, because this food can be made cheaply and called healthy, even though there's not a lot of health that comes with that. And now we have cheap crap food. And we need to idolize our European brethren a little bit more and realize that we need smaller portions, better quality food. Be willing to spend the money to buy that food, and take the time to learn how to cook it and eat it with friends and family and actually enjoy it instead of just being a chore or, like I said, the battery to just pop in. Like, really make food a better experience and better quality. So once we fix ourselves, then other problems will also be fixed as well, because we're going to put and support those areas that are actually better for us. All right, I think that is about it. I will try and remember to link that stuff down below. And yeah, thank you for joining me today. This was a good video, and I think I'll do more things like this, because I kind of like those videos where they go over something like this and kind of break it down. And maybe I made sense, maybe I'm more confusing. You know, who knows? You're going to just tell me whether or not you liked it or not. So anyway, I hope you have a great weekend. Most likely no video tomorrow, but for sure on Monday. So stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you then. Bye.